We get the update in around about 3 minutes time, so we'll see if there's any changes and whether or not we'll be able to get underway again later. But looking at the conditions that we have, it certainly wouldn't be too likely. In the gravel traps there, you can see once there's pools of water sitting in the gravel traps, that's also a big cause of concern.
Just wanted to go back to what we were talking about a couple of moments ago. Well, this is what a bike looks like in the current conditions. Just wanted to go back to what we were talking about with regards to Kawasaki. Over the course of last winter, a great deal of discussion over the course of this season as well. And in recent rounds, a couple of statements that came out of Kawasaki that sort of sounded like contrition almost, or an apology to Jonathan Rea. They clearly feel that Rea has got the maximum out of that package, and that the package wasn't quite up to the same level as Toprak Razgatlioglu was able to receive. So they certainly haven't blamed the rider, and why would you? He's just been 6 times world champion. They seem to have fallen on their swords to some extent, the Kawasaki management. So that's something they're going to be looking to put right from their side for next season.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes back to the start of the season and the confusion about the homologation for the newer Kawasaki. The big change for Kawasaki was an aerodynamic upgrade, and that's why the FIM didn't offer them that new homologation for their engine. It'll be interesting to see how Kawasaki approach the off-season, because speaking to Rea right from the start of the season, he said that he could see the big difference that testing with those 500 revs meant. It meant less gear shifts around the track. It made for a more adaptable bike. And obviously enough over the course of this season, we've seen Rea have to ride right on the limit, and he's been caught out a few times.
Yes, of course, we are not used to, and we haven't been used to in recent years, seeing Jonathan Rea falling from any race, frankly. But Donington Park, race 2, race 1 in Most, I could barely believe it once I'd seen that. 2 races that he had crashed out of. Of course, he remounted in Donington, but outside of the points. And then at the Portuguese round, 2 incidents, and that was really almost, you feel, born out of frustration by that stage of the season. To be able to genuinely take the fight to Toprak Razgatlioglu on track, Jonathan Rea had to ride beyond the capacity of the motorcycle, it appeared at times.
Yeah, and that was one of the big things that defined the season. Those crashes for Rea, obviously a lot of them on the front end, whenever we saw him really having to push hard in the braking zones. The reason for that was he felt he was giving up a lot of ground in other areas around the racetrack, needed to be right on that limit at all the times, and that was the difference between the kind of consistency and comfort that we saw from Rea at different times in the past, where he was very adaptable on the bike. Now he needed to ride in a very defined way, and it was really difficult.
Yes, was that a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or a mixture of both? The safety car is out there, and we saw much the same yesterday, and we all remember how that ended. Look at the plumes of water coming off, and they're inconsistent as well. Some areas look to be more heavily inundated than others. Normally, Steve, when we're seeing these kind of pictures, we know what the outcome is going to be. We'll wait for official confirmation, and hopefully we'll get news ASAP, because riders and personnel waiting at the moment, but the rain is still coming down with the same intensity.
Yeah, there's that sense of inevitability right now. You can see for Andrea Dossoli just heading back into the Yamaha pit box. There in the apron with Nico Canepa. You can see on the left-hand side of the screen. Canepa's a person not to be underestimated in the importance that he's had within Yamaha over the last few years. Acts as a test rider for them, races for them in the Endurance World Championship, but actually works really closely as a rider, analyst and coach, and goes out and does a lot of video analysis around the racetrack. Really important for being able to bring that feedback back to the garage, talks with the engineers, he's involved in all the debriefs. Obviously as a test rider as well, he's a very analytical feedback, and he's able to bring back what he sees on the racetrack, compares that with the data, and then able to really help bring the Yamaha project forward.
Quick mention for Andrea Dossoli as well, usually a sort of serious figure within that pit box, a calming influence, as you'd expect given the gravitas of his position, but he too looked pretty emotional earlier on today when Toprak finally sealed that title.
And I think everyone was emotional for it. Obviously Yamaha, only their 2nd World SBK title, even with some of the riders they've had over the years. You obviously think back to the 90s and all of the successes that Nori Haga had. Troy Corser's been on the bike. Obviously Ben Spies back in 2009 was their world champion, and then over the last few years they've had some really great riders on the bike. All of them pushed that project forward. It's Toprak that made the difference and got them across the line though.
And Yamaha, who haven't had a manufacturers championship since 2007, the year that Ben Spies won, he wasn't able to do enough on his own for Yamaha to take that Manufacturers World Championship. Yamaha 2007, the last time that they won. Ducati last in 2011, and of course 6 consecutive cup titles in the Manufacturers Championship for Kawasaki. That run comes to an end.
Yeah, and for Kawasaki, they've been the team and the manufacturer to beat for the last 10 years, but now they're the ones that are going to have to do the chasing, and that's where the winter is going to be really interesting. And certainly you wouldn't want to be fighting against a wounded Provec racing team, and Jonathan Rea, they'll be out to make sure all their stones are unturned for next season and find everything that they can.
So we're waiting for news, and as soon as we have anything, we'll pass it on to you. The fans that are waiting patiently in the grandstands were in the same position here yesterday, of course. And as we've said, as soon as we have any information, we'll pass it on. But just official confirmation that we're waiting for here, I think. Fans almost cheering on the safety car, you feel, eager to get information. They're hoping that we're going racing, but I think the likelihood is either a further postponement or an outright cancellation. And based on what we saw yesterday, where the conditions did not improve to any extent, and the track was never going to be ready for racing, and certainly not before we got to the end of the day's light, then you'd fancy is more than likely to be the latter at the moment.
Yeah, and we'll wait and see what decisions made. You can see for Michael Ruben Rinaldi being kept busy there in the Ducati pit box, and for Rinaldi, it's been an up and down season, and certainly hasn't been the year he would have wanted or expected, but able to come away with top 5 in the World Championship. He was able to win some races. He just needs to find that more consistency over the course of a full season. Obviously not on his day, he's been really impressive with the Ducati.
You did say previously, Steve, that I think people have almost overestimated what the expectations should have been for Michael Ruben Rinaldi at the start of this season, and that when you look at the top 3 in the championship, Rascatlioglu, Ray and Redding, well, it was always going to be difficult to get on terms with those. If Rinaldi had finished 4th in this championship, I think that would have been a job well done, no?
Well, I always look at it and think of when you go to the start of the season, what's your expectation and what happens at the end of the season. My expectation for Rinaldi, and I said this right from when the decision was made to replace Chaz Davis with him, was that Ducati's success in that move was going to be dictated more or less by whether or not they were able to win the World Championship with Scott Redding. Rinaldi wasn't hired to win the World Championship. He was hired to be that number 2 rider, win some races. He did that. Ducati didn't get the job done with Scott Redding for a number of reasons. They've had a very good season. They need to be more consistent. They need to have that bike working every week, because there were too many holes in the Ducati season this year. You look at some of those really off weekends that Scott Redding had in the middle of the season. They can't afford to go up against Toprak and Jonathan Rea with that issue again next year. I think Rinaldi's done well. Top 5 in the world is what was really expected of him.
It's a bit of a golden boy for Ducati as well. He's come up through their stock programs and so on. He rode for the Aruba IT Junior outfit before stepping up into the Superbike World Championship, the Aruba IT Ducati factory concern, and I'm sure their hope for him is that, given prolonged time and more experience of racing at the highest level, that he can gradually become the man of the future for Ducati and become the number 1 rider in the future. But clearly they don't feel that time is now, otherwise they wouldn't have brought in a big name like Alvaro Bautista.
Yeah, I think the Bautista news, obviously to replace Scott Redding with Alvaro Bautista, it was a bit of a storm in the paddock whenever word first came out at Donington Park that this could have been possible, but Ducati were able to bring back a rider that had a lot of success, probably bring him back on a pretty cheap deal considering the last couple of years that Bautista's had, and you can have a rider that's really motivated. So Ducati's decision, we'll wait and see whether or not that's going to be vindicated, because we saw in 2019 that even though Alvaro Bautista dominated those opening 5 rounds of the year, it wasn't enough for him to be able to get across the line. 4 rounds of the year. It wasn't enough for him against Jonathan Rea, because the season fell apart from him very quickly. He needs to show that he's learned from that he's made a step forward. But certainly Ducati, they saw enough in those early season races to know that they've got a rider that can win big for them with the V4R.
Yes, he needs more Aragons and fewer Laguna Secas. Thinking back to that 2019 season, that weekend in particular was the sort of death knell of his championship hopes. I think that proves the point. It looks like a Norwegian fjord more than anything else as the safety car makes its way through off the circuit.
Yeah, that'll be the FIM delegation in there, just trying to understand what's off the racing line as well and what's off the racetrack, and that gives you a good indication of just how much rain's fallen. So we'll get an update once they come back into the pit lane.
and I don't think it will be too long either before we get information, because it's not raceable as things are. The rain is continuing to drive down pretty heavily. It's a risk in this part of the world at this time of year that you can be caught out. We've seen it in this zone of Southeast Asia, of course. We've seen it in Malaysia previously, but it's Indonesia in 2021.
Yeah, the one thing to remember is it's also, you can have this earlier in the year as well. I remember Sepang for MotoGP or for Formula 1 earlier in their season, they had something similar as well. So it is possible in this region.
Scott Redding just taking the opportunity to catch up and on all of the entertainment over the course of this weekend. Although it does look like we may well lose race 2, it has been an entertaining first visit to Indonesia nonetheless. Fans seem to have enjoyed it.
I think everyone's enjoyed coming down to here. Just to been a shame that we've had these conditions that's affected 2 of the races, but certainly we've been able to see some great action on track. Good introduction to World SBK here in Mandalika.
So we wait to see what the official news will be. And as I say, that information should be coming pretty swiftly, because track conditions were due to be assessed at 3:30. We did see the safety car exit pit lane just over 10 minutes ago, about 25 past. So they've been out there now for 10 minutes to put in a couple of laps. And I suspect we're just waiting just a couple more moments before we hear some news from the Mandalika International Circuit, and indeed from Race Direction, who were the ones that come to the decisions about this. Clearly in the interests of safety, we delayed the start of race number 2, just as we delayed the start of race 1 yesterday. Eventually race 1 was postponed. It was moved to this morning, which replaced the Tissot Superpole race. The Tissot Superpole race was therefore cancelled. It has been unfortunate with the weather. Yeah, it really has been unfortunate, and it's been a real shame, because I think after the season we had, everyone wanted to have one last race where they were all able to scrap it out and really show everything they had in the racetrack. Everyone with nothing to lose to finish off the season. It's time to get started on the work of a world champion and an ambassador, of course, now for the sport is Razgat Lioglu, and I suspect there'll be a fair number of those world champion t-shirts to sign. I'll tell you what, I didn't know that Charlie Hiscott's son was also called Charlie on that t-shirt. Clearly said to Charlie from Top Rack, so maybe Charlie's a bit of a fan there at Top Rack as well. I didn't spot who it was initially who was after the t-shirt. I only saw it after he began to walk away. Chaz Davies pit box. Trying to get the fans up and alive in the grandstands. They've been treated to a highly entertaining Supersport race. They've been treated to the world champion being decided in front of them. This reminds me of the late pictures we saw in Assen with the riders trying to cheer the fans 2 years ago. Yeah, it is full grandstands here on the pit straight as well, and certainly a lot of excitement for World SBK to return to Indonesia. Obviously MotoGP coming here as well at the start of next season, and it's exciting times to be in the region. Chaz Davies and Michael Ruben Rinaldi. Of course, both Ducati regulars. The fans keen to show off their t-shirts in honour of this occasion. The first visit to the Mandalika International Circuit. Certainly didn't expect to see Michael Ruben Rinaldi stripping down his shorts with a coat for comfort over the top of it. Mandalika International Circuit. Certainly didn't expect to see Michael Ruben Rinaldi stripping down his shorts with a coat for comfort over the top. It's a bit slippery across pit wall there for Isaac Vinales, needing to use that helmet just to get across, but good end of the season for Isaac as well. We saw him have some strong performances to close out the season, and still waiting for an update on the conditions here. Obviously we've just seen the safety car come back to the pit, so an update should be coming fairly soon. If you are just joining us, race 2 from the Pirelli Indonesian round for the 2021 campaign. Delayed from the scheduled start time as a result of heavy downpours at the moment, monsoon conditions here at the Mandalika International Circuit. Our first visit to this venue, and we've been greeted by rain yesterday and rain today as well. but we managed to get it on. We managed to get it on in 2021 as well, considering work on the circuit only started in August of last year. It's been an incredible effort from all of the local people, and I do understand that those that have been involved in this project have been working all hours of the day to try and get the venue ready. The backs of the pit boxes were still undergoing work late on in advance of the round, and there are still finishing touches to be put to the infrastructure in and around the circuit as well. But it has been an entertaining visit, and I'm certain that we're going to be back here. Of course, MotoGP also due to visit the Mandalika International Circuit, and they will hope and surely receive different weather conditions as well.
Yeah, they'll come in February for a test to learn the track and get up to speed, and then they'll be here in one of their early season rounds at the end of March. And certainly for MotoGP, they'll get a big crowd here as well. And obviously enough, we were pretty much last minute to get a lot of the details finished around the track. So for MotoGP, they'll have the finished article and everything ready for it. And like you said, Alex, over the course of the next few years, infrastructure is going to improve around here, and a lot of investment coming as well to the Mandalika region.
Hopefully we'll be in a better position travel-wise as well. These have been two unprecedented seasons, of course, as a result of the global pandemic. And once we battled through the early months where our thoughts were with those who had loved ones suffering in the pandemic, we've been able to then get the championship back up and running. We had 8 rounds successfully completed in 2020. We went down to the wire with the final round being the decider in Estoril, and Jonathan Rea sealing his 6th world title, and then in 2021 a sort of second COVID pandemic season really, but we have managed to get international travel back up and running for our final 2 rounds to San Juan and now to the island of Lombok. So we have done well, not least thinking back to Australia 2020 when we managed to squeeze that one in just before the pandemic really hit its worst.
Yeah, I think last year everyone in the paddock felt lucky to be able to get back to racing and have almost a full season. This year it's felt like a normal season by and large, and obviously these end of season flyways really did make it feel like we were back to a world championship action, and the flyway is always a very different atmosphere.
Latest news we have is that the track conditions will be reviewed again at 4 p.m. So we will wait until 4 p.m. for another check on the track conditions. That was a new tongue twister I just invented for the Superbike World Championship. At 4 p.m. We will have further news. If you are just joining us, we are live from the Mandalika International Circuit on the island of Lombok for the 2021 Pirelli Indonesian round. Unfortunately, track conditions have not allowed us to start race 2 on time as originally planned. Race 1 was also postponed from yesterday afternoon. That took place earlier on here today. We did manage to get in race 1 and get a world champion confirmed. And talking about confirmed, we're just now waiting on a final check on track conditions, and that is due at 4 p.m. And as soon as we have any news on that, we will pass that straight on to you.
Cuma pakai filter ya.